Hello and welcome to the Vicars Watch Dibley,
the podcast where three priests link our stories with those of a Reverend Geraldine Granger and other TV vicars. I'm Kate.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Ruthie. This episode we're talking about Songs of Praise, the second episode in the first series of the Vicar of Dibley. This week we're going to start with something a little bit different, and hopefully it'll be something that we do regularly, filling in the blank of the statement, I'm a vicar, and just to show that we do things outside of vicaring. We do have lives, even if they are quite small and boring sometimes, but actually they're not always boring, because Kate, you're going to fill in our blank today.
Yeah, so this week I'm a vicar and I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons this evening.
Ooh!
Yeah.
Nerd.
Well, actually, to be really nerdy, it's not Dungeons and Dragons. We're playing a game called The Quiet Year, building a world which we're going to play a game called Monster of a Weekend. None of which may make sense to you, but it is so fun. And in fact, at my previous church, instead of starting a Bible study, I actually started this Dungeons and Dragons, or role-playing group, as we'd call it. And it's really fun, and we've become really good friends, and we've gotten really close, and we have lots of fun in fantasy worlds together.
That's amazing.
So talking about hanging out with friends then, hello to you, Kate.
Hello.
And hello, Ruthie.
Hello.
Good to be back with you as we record this second episode. Very exciting. And also hello to you, dear listener. We hope that you're well today. It's lovely to be with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
It is. So why don't we start with what's been happening in the past week? How have you been since we last talked?
Oh, this past week I've been wrestling MailChimp. Have either of you used MailChimp before?
No.
No. So I'm wrestling MailChimp as a way to send out emails from work stuff and creating templates and stuff like that.
You know, Ruthie, I'm so glad you talked about answering emails, because I've got to say, I thought you were going to talk about wrestling mails.
Wrestling mails. Not done any of that this week yet. Actually, no. I have wrestled my son. So if that counts.
Maybe.
Definitely.
What have you been up to, Jenny?
Well, do you know, since we last got together, I've had such an amazing week this week. I had PCC on Monday, and normally everyone goes, oh no, and roll your eyes. Like, PCC is never good news, right? The parochial church council, the leadership of the church gathering together in a cold, chilly church to talk about what decisions we're going to make. That's like, shall we tidy the children's area? No, for that would be change. You know, there's that terrible stereotype, isn't there? But we had the most amazing meeting. We saw through some amazing new plans for like the next year, talking about money, how we're going to develop things for our children and youth, how we're going to start giving away more and like caring for the, you know, those who are struggling a bit financially around us and a bit more beyond. And I literally left the meeting like singing and dancing the whole way home. And then last night I had a bit of alpha and just chatting to people about faith and why it's important. So looking back over this week, I'm like, I've had a really good week and I'm very grateful for it.
It's really good to hear.
Thank you. Thank you. Hooray. Praise the Lord.
Yay. How about you, Kate?
So I've had a lot of occasional offices coming in this past week. So an occasional office, that's baptisms, weddings, funerals. And it's really lovely. It's like one of the best parts of ministry, I think we can all agree. But it is so emotionally draining. So I've just been on a roller coaster of highs and lows like every day this past week.
Oh, bless you.
Anyway, shall we move on to what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so today we are talking about the second episode in the Vicar of Dibley series from series 1, which is called Songs of Praise. So what we're going to do, as we did last time, is we're going to go through the episode kind of scene by scene and just talk about things that we noticed or picked up, things that relate to what we're doing, things that are totally bizarre and don't make sense to our jobs at all, and things that we found funny. And I'm sure Kate, as the nerd that she is, has come up with some weird facts for us that she's properly researched. And I'm looking forward to hearing all that she has to say.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. So we start with a parish meeting, which we haven't fully established what it is. Is it a parochial church council? Is it the other thing? Parish council? It does say parish council.
They're definitely talking about church business in this
meeting.
Yeah.
So who knows what this weird hybrid meeting is? And we kick things off with Owen being disgusting as a
classic.
Sets a good tone. Sets a good tone for the episode. Yeah. I think actually it's really good for just breaking that tension of being around the table. Jenny's already talked about how people react, like, oh, it's a meeting. So it's really nice to start nice lowbrow, especially when we move in immediately to any other business.
Yes, after discussing putting a gloved arm up a sheep's bottom.
I know. The fact that wasn't in any other business is...
yeah, what were they talking about beforehand that led to this?
So David introduces AOB, which I don't know about you, but is one of the most anxiety driving parts of any meeting, because you think a meeting is over and then suddenly everyone says, oh, actually I've got something else I'd like to add, and a meeting like suddenly lasts another half hour.
Oh, I think I have a nerd fact about this.
Ooh.
I think technically any other business needs to be declared like 24 hours beforehand. Jenny is nodding vigorously.
That's what we do. AOB could contain like a last minute update, but otherwise it's like if you haven't sent your info, your piece of question or item ahead of the meeting, then I'm afraid it can't go in the agenda. And AOB is pretty much this kind of hanging around, but it's off the agenda really.
Well, there we go. So David, very not subtle at all, pushes Hugo to announce an anonymous and extraordinarily generous gift to the church.
With quotation marks, most definitely. Yeah. The new King James version of the Bible, replacing that paperback for modern men.
Which kind of brings me to a question. I think Bible translations, personally, why are there so many different translations of the Bible? And do you have a preferred translation of the Bible for use in church?
Ooh, good question.
Ooh.
I tend to use the NRSV, New Revised Standard Version. I think you can have it anglicised, so that's proper Church of England. I think because it manages to be fairly gender neutral where it should be. Unlike the NIV, which is the New International Version, and is quite accurate to the text. But I would say as well, I think it does depend on context, and I think it's really important to read different versions. Yeah. And so depending on the sermon that I'm giving, or if it's a Bible study or something like that, I'll always have different versions, because I think it's really interesting to see where it changes and where words are slightly different, and how does that change the meaning.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm really similar actually. It's NRSV for like in church formal writing. Randomly, NIV for personal use, because that's the Bible I've had since I was like 15, and just it's familiar and sweet. But I dabble it like you, Ruthie. If I'm looking into things, I do love a bit of the Message every now and then. Like the translations are just they kind of contextualize things a little bit more. So I do find that interesting as well.
Yeah,
but hardly ever. Here's a confession: hardly ever the King James version.
Oh no.
Yeah, I'm afraid to say. I know there might be some people who are like, the language is rich and glorious. Haven't developed my love for that yet, but maybe it's to come.
Yeah, I mean, so I'll occasionally, I think like both of you, I'll most likely default to the NRSV for use in church. It's sort of a default Church of England text. It's fairly inoffensive generally. Some might call it a bit bland. It's not exciting or dynamic, but it's good. I think it's quite solid, and it's reliable. But if I'm preparing a sermon for personal use, I'll probably try and compare different translations, because that's what we was suggested when we were at college, but also because of my background in linguistics and learning languages and translation. That's something I really enjoy, is comparing. And I'll occasionally, like if I'm really going into comparing different translations, I'll probably have the NRSV, the KJV and the NIV, maybe the ESV.
Whoa!
And then you can sort of look at kind of what the differences are. And sometimes I'll look at the KJV because lots of people still default to it in memory as their translation.
Yeah, it depends on your congregation, doesn't it? But if you have an older congregation, actually they'll memorise bits that are from the King James Version. And it is David's preferred version, as it would. He's very definitely said, as opposed to any of these trendy versions.
However, what I find really funny about this is he talks about the glorious nobility of "in the beginning of a word," which is a pretty universal translation across all the different versions.
In the beginning was the word.
Like, I've never heard that translated differently.
No.
I guess maybe the message. This is setting up really the punchline for the end of the episode, which is a kind of B storyline, which is going to go throughout this episode with Alice giving her reading. And it's all being set up with David introducing this really uber traditional version of the Bible.
Look forward to that later. I also picked up on this bit about David saying about the peace and not wanting to shake hands. I really miss the peace.
So really ironically, I had a meeting this week with my church wardens talking about where we're going and some of our plans moving forward. We're recording this in the middle of the pandemic and we've suspended the peace. And I was actually really implored and asked when we're going to bring this back because they so miss sharing handshakes and hugs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you do anything to replace it at the moment? Do you do like a wave or sign language or a nod?
Yeah, socially distanced sharing of a piece.
We wave, and it is my son's favourite bit of the entire service because where the children's corner is, we're kind of off to the side, and so I always make sure he's on my hip because he loves waving at everyone, and everyone loves waving back at him, and he suddenly thinks, this is my moment. Everyone's here to see me. They all want to wave at me and I will wave back and occasionally blow kisses.
That's brilliant. Yeah, we wave at our church as well.
Yeah.
I do like it. But yeah, I do miss the peace. Although I have found across the church context I've worked in, it is that thing that divides people. Some people love it. It's such a helpful thing to get them in the right frame of mind before Holy Communion. For others, it's like, they're more like David and they don't want to shake the hand of the melodious creature in the next door pew or however he puts it, or give them a kiss.
So the history of it is about making peace with your neighbours, isn't it, before you come up to receive communion, and that's the reason behind it, isn't it, that you're making peace with everyone so you're ready to receive. Whereas I think lots of places now just kind of see it as a chance to say hello to folks and have a little natter before you sing a song before communion. Basically that seems to be what people think it is now. We used to have the peace would go on for like 10 minutes at a previous church because everyone was just chatting to each other. Come on, crack on, we've got things to do, the Lord to receive. It is funny the different traditions that church have as well about how we receive the peace, because I used to work at a church in France, and so they would do the kiss on each cheek for the peace, bisou, which feels weird when you're a repressed English person coming over to France. This is very intimate, and the number of kisses changes where you're from. Anyway, that's a lot.
Wow.
What about in Hong Kong?
Yeah, so I lived in Hong Kong for a year working as a teacher in a kindergarten, and I went to a couple of churches there, trying out some different traditions while I was away from England, experimenting, finding out if I really was Anglican or if I was comfortable anywhere else. Really, it was as it was in England for a lot of the places I went to. Definitely the first two I went to an English Anglican church in Hong Kong in Kowloon, and that was just like a church in England really, except hotter. Then I went to a big interdenominational church that met in a cinema. So that's interdenominational means people from all different types of Christian backgrounds, but often very evangelical. And that was what you would expect from a very big evangelical church. Lots of time spent hugging and talking, a piece that lasted a really long time. And then I went to a bilingual Cantonese and English Baptist church for a little bit. And we went around sharing the piece, except because it was bilingual. And at that point, I don't think I knew how to say peace be with you in Cantonese. So often I would just say, Zhou San, good morning. But it was lovely. Actually, I think that was the most powerful expression of a piece that I've ever experienced, because it was cross-cultural and across different languages. And even though we didn't necessarily speak the same language, we were sharing in the spirit of...
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So David explains his grievances with the piece, and then Geraldine brings up some any other business, which is a little letter that she has received from a Mr. Tristan Campbell, who wants Songs of Praise. Wait, what are you booing? Are you booing Songs of Praise or Tristan?
Tristan. We'll get to this.
I can't wait.
I'm not booing Songs of Praise. Could anyone boo Songs of Praise?
Have you both watched a lot of Songs of Praise
No.
or been involved in one?
No, like hardly any. I'm really sad and ashamed to say. But there's a lot of people in my parish who are big fans. So
Yeah, I think obviously for us it's work.
Yeah.
And I'm not really inclined to watch. I really appreciate Songs of Praise and everything it stands for. But if I've spent all day in church, I'm not particularly inclined to then watch another church service. But that's just me.
Yeah, I remember when we were probably about teenagers, as a family, we started a bit of a tradition of having, this is going to sound so middle upper class, which we're not really as a family, but here we are. We had afternoon tea, which was basically we had tea cakes and sandwiches and watched Songs of Praise.
Oh.
And I don't know why we started that, but we did. So I vaguely remember watching it there. It was all when it was Alan Jones and what was her name? Pam someone? The lady? I can't remember. So this is probably in the early noughties that I was watching this, late noughties. But I can't remember it particularly. Like you, Kate, Songs of Praise, what it stands for, I really admire, but it does feel a bit too much like work watching it. Although I imagine through most of the pandemic, it's been an absolute lifeline for lots of people that that was church for them. But I have to say, I've not watched many episodes.
In fact, Songs of Praise really is church for a lot of people, even outside of a pandemic. I know a lot of people, it's that experience on a Sunday of sitting down, listening to the music, listening to the little vox pieces, exploring things. And that's it for them, because going into church for a service isn't always accessible for everyone.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people who are housebound or just find it really difficult to get to church for whatever reason, Songs of Praise is something which they can tune into without any anxiety of people talking to them, questioning them, and it's always there.
Yeah. I was talking to a friend recently who's probably a similar age to us, a little bit younger, I think. And I don't think she has any particular church background. But she was just asking me about Songs of Praise because she was watching it. And I thought to myself, you're not the demographic I was expecting to be listening to Songs of Praise or watching Songs of Praise. And yet it seemed to be a regular thing that she did. I need to question her more about it.
Okay, and as this meeting draws to a close, there's one more thing I've noticed that I'd really like to ask. So, there's a joke that David makes about Geraldine's breasts. Is this okay?
Ooh.
Because Geraldine makes jokes about her own breasts to David in the previous episode. Is it okay for David to make a joke about her breasts? I'm going to leave this. Let's not answer it, because I think, again, there's a theme throughout this episode where we see a contrast of different standards for David and for Geraldine in terms of how you interact with members of the opposite sex to whom you're attracted. So, yeah, let's not answer that for now, but I just wanted to ask that question.
I have to say, I did notice in this episode, more than perhaps in others, that there is a lot of innuendo and there's a lot of emphasis on like attraction, dating, flirting, fancying, nakedness. So yeah, it'll be interesting to unpack that.
Yeah, and the general sexualization of clergy as well, which I think that sounds really clever, doesn't it? I think we'll be exploring that later on. So the meeting comes to a close and they decide that they're going to say yes to Songs of Praise recording. And the reason Songs of Praise wants to be there is because Geraldine is a woman. And is that a bit of tokenism from Songs of Praise? Who knows? So we have the meeting end and we start the choir auditions.
Yeah.
And we have Cecil appear at the door, who, interestingly, it's the same bloke who plays the Archdeacon in Rev, isn't it?
Oh, it is! I was trying to work out where I recognised him from.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a stunning crossover from Vicar of Dibley to Rev.
I
did not make that connection.
My headcanon is now that Cecil goes on to become ordained and becomes an archdeacon.
He needs his own series.
Characters, then. I have to say, I think I've met quite a few Cecils through working the church. I'm not married and I don't go out much, and sitting a little bit too close for comfort.
But Cecil is lovely.
He's a bit creepy though.
He's probably got his heart in the right place.
Yeah.
I mean, he's very good at conducting. We know that about him.
Oh, the way he waves his arms. Goodness. So the first set of auditions, no one comes to it. And then they add to the notice that there's a very small chance that they might be on telly with an audience of approximately 1.3 million. And suddenly there's a crowd of people who want to audition to be part of the church choir. And quite a few of them sing the same song. You fill up my senses. My question to you two is, if you were to audition for a choir, which I believe, Jenny, you have done, what song would you sing?
It depends. I think for me, it depends what kind of choir it is. So I love singing gospel choir. I'm trying to think. I don't think we had to audition to get in, although I have done some singing. I tell you what, I think if it was a choir, I tell you what I love. I love the hymn. I've been playing it on repeat recently, which is why it's in my mind, is All People That on Earth Do Dwell. Oh, what a belter. But I also love, if I was doing gospel, then Take the Shackles Off My Feet so I can dance. Oh my goodness. It makes me just want to rejoice in hallelujahs.
So during these auditions, did you notice Geraldine doing the pastoral head tilt? So
no, but I imagine she was.
There's this, we were actually taught this in college when we did in our first term of pastoral listening exercises, to tilt your head to an angle and it shows that you're listening. And it became, I guess, a bit of a meme among us that we'd notice when someone is doing it, because when you're doing it, it kind of indicates that you've entered into this, that's very interesting, tell me more phase.
The pastoral head tilt. And there's a very specific angle with it, isn't there? Like 45 degrees would be way too much. You just like
it's just
hitting a 20 degree.
It's a 20 degree.
Just a little tilt as opposed to head on shoulder.
It was this detail that just, it showed me how researched this character was, that Dawn French knew to do that. Yeah.
I'd love to, there was a vicar that she spoke to, wasn't there? He was the kind of person who kicked off all this, and I'd love to listen to interviews of them talking, if there are any, just to see what was picked up from it. I also enjoyed Owen turns up to audition and makes a joke about saying about what his voice was like. What did he say? Oh yes, well I thought I'd have a go. Mum says I used to sing like an angel, and I was just like, what's the name of that bloke? Lovely voice, youngster, in the charts, no testicles. And then it says about being a Welsh bloke, and Geraldine makes the joke about Tom Jones having rather a lot of testicles, but actually no, he's referring to Alan Jones, and I think it's beautiful that Alan Jones now does Songs of Praise.
Yes, yeah, I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Whether we'll keep the bit about testicles, we'll see. So we meet back at Geraldine's after the choir has started to be formed, and we have the beginning of the great romance that is Alice and Hugo alluded to when Geraldine asks her, "You've got a little bit of a crush on Hugo, haven't you? Have you done much matchmaking as Vicars?"
Not really.
Jenny's racking her brain.
I'm racking my brains, but no, I don't think I have. I think it's too risky. I mean, I did do a little bit of matchmaking in college.
Oh, yes, you did. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome. But
Another
no,
podcast. Another episode, we can tell the story of how Jenny got me and my partners together.
I would love that. But in church, I think it is, it's too risky, I think. But the way that Geraldine does it is just perfect.
Yeah, I think it's different because they've got that friendship, haven't they?
Yeah.
We do quite a lot of matchmaking in the form of marrying people. But
that's true.
Kicking stuff off, not necessarily.
And after Geraldine has asked Alice about her crush, Alice asks it back. She sort of asks if Geraldine dates many people. And for me, there's this really tragic moment that stuck with me for a really long time where Geraldine says that no one wants to date a female vicar. And I feel that's something which all three of us have heard at points in our journey towards ordination.
Oh, yeah. When I was 17 was when I was first exploring whether I might be called to be a priest. One of the first meetings I had with a woman who was a vicar to talk through what that might mean, she said in that first meeting, you do realise if you go down this path, you may never get married or have children. And I was 17 years old at the time, and already being told these are the sacrifices that you'll have to make in order to pursue ministry. And all of us at college started out, we were all single, weren't we, when we first started college? And I think there were quite a few young single women, weren't there? And that was a big worry, I think, for lots of us, that we've picked this track and therefore we're not going to get married.
Yeah, and I remember really clearly one of the older women, so not older in terms of age, but in terms of being a couple of years ahead of us, saying, oh, there's two types of young female trainee vicars. Those who still have hope that they're going to get married, and those who faced reality, or something to that extent.
Faced reality.
It was something to that extent, and I've just held that. I mean, I think this particular scene in Vicar of Dibley and the whole theme that goes throughout the series was my biggest fear when I first started hearing the call. I distinctly remember saying, I don't want to be like the Vicar of Dibley because no one will want to marry me.
Yeah.
And I'm over that now. But at the time, it was huge for me.
Oh, definitely. We had those single people meetings, didn't we?
Yeah.
With one of our tutors who was single. And it was... it turned into a bit of a wine drinking club, didn't it, at times? Just... the way that we were treated as single people was definitely different to those who were married. So married people seemed to get a lot more benefits than we did as single people. So they had houses that they lived in, but they also had a study space in college, whereas those of us who were single had a bedroom, essentially. And our living room was the common room, so anyone could be in there for stuff like that.
Yeah, it was. And it was just this boiling pot of pressure and not really having your own space. But it is worth saying that our married colleagues also had troubles as well, because they were living on a much more restricted budget and they'd had to move all their families. So there's difficulties whether you're single or whether you're married. And I think actually that's an important thing to take away, is through the process of going for ordination, a really big thing is made out of whether you're married or you're single, and it's almost false anxieties are created about whether or not you're going to get married or find someone if you get ordained first. And it's all false, it's all nonsense, because Ruthie, you got married after being ordained. Jenny, you're engaged. it's still possible. And we know loads of people who
Yeah.
get into relationships and marriages that break down after ordination as well, because we're all
Yeah,
human.
definitely. Yeah. And it's probably worth defining as well that it was married or single. If you were in a relationship with someone, even if it was long term, you were in the single camp for the purposes of college. And I felt a lot of pressure with it. But then I married someone from college, so that went quite well for me, really. There's then a knock at the door, and Geraldine stops by the door with Alice and says, "Enter if you're sexy and love Jesus." And part of me has always wanted to do that, answering the door, but I've never been brave enough to do it.
I'm so tempted to get a sign to put in my window.
Yes!
This is what I did.
Seriously.
When I was at university, this is exactly what I did. I had a paper plate. I think we had to do some sort of like creative exercise at some point. And obviously I watched the Vicar of Dibley as much as I don't know, ate bread throughout university. So this quote was always on my heart. And yeah, I literally decorated a paper plate with "Enter if you're sexy and love Jesus" and stuck it to my front door in my dorm where I was for uni. I loved it.
Did it work?
I would say it did.
Oh.
And obviously I passed in and out the most, so hello.
Hello.
Oh, yes,
Oh,
true.
yes.
Oh, that's a great affirmation.
That
for
is
you,
a great
isn't it?
affirmation.
Maybe I'll put that on my study door every time I come in. Enter if you're sexy and love Jesus.
Even just, you are sexy and you love Jesus.
Yeah. Just a reminder for each day.
But of course, this does backfire a bit. And I remember when we were first looking at safeguarding in college, cringing a little bit, because it just sets up potential issues. Although I've come to terms, actually, I think it's great confidence and that Geraldine's unashamed to be a sexual being. And
Yeah.
Mm.
Yes,
But
definitely.
but she opens the door and there is David Horton.
Which is the perfect person to be behind the door after that particular phrase. Yeah.
And I think what we see there is, at least what I picked up on, is there's a sort of David, the contrast between this great female friendship between Alice and Geraldine, and then David's disapproval of that, of all the aspects of their feminine friendship, which is having a giggle
Everything.
and vote that stereotype of female friendship.
Yeah. But then he comes, where is he?
Oh, he's added the Bible onto the lectern, hasn't he? And he's having a go at, I wouldn't hold your hopes out, Vicar, that this Songs of Praise, guys, is probably not going to arrive when the doorbell goes.
Yes.
Now, there was some heat coming off Kate earlier when we talked about Tristan, wasn't there? So now he's about to make an appearance onto the podcast. I'm getting nervous as to what this reaction will be. Doorbell goes. The Vicar, Geraldine, she opens the door. And there he is. And I'm sure, is there not in the background a, this is curly hair shining.
Tristan is played by a young Peter Capaldi, who people will know from The Thick of It or from Doctor Who. And I have to say, I love Peter Capaldi, hate the character of Tristan.
Do you find him attractive?
Ooh.
He has nice hair.
Classic Vicar response.
I just the way she fawns over him, and I just think,
But isn't that classic when you have the anxiety about being single,
yeah,
and when someone who is remotely attractive or could be a match comes onto the scene, don't you exaggerate your attraction a little?
and I think that's part of church culture as well, that there's a lot of matchmaking going on in certain traditions of if they see two people of a similar age of opposite genders, because obviously no one's going to be gay or a lesbian or anything else in between. People just throw around and go, oh, have you seen the new person?
Yeah, and if we think about the psychology of this scene, Geraldine's just been despairing about her singleness. And then suddenly this attractive man turns up at the door. Haven't we all sometimes read a little bit of divine providence into a situation when it wasn't really there?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely. So Tristan and David meet, and that's interesting. They're opposites in so many ways, aren't they? That I think David sees himself as a very manly man and conforms to gender stereotypes of what a man should be, whereas Tristan, he's in TV, he's got his floppy hair and his floppy jacket, and I would like to at some point talk about the 90s fashion that is going on in these different episodes, because it's a lot. And then, whereas Tristan seems a lot more freer in expressing himself without conforming to gender stereotypes. So they seem kind of opposite in lots of ways.
And at the same time, there's a certain amount of turning things on their head where Tristan exposes just a slight difference of perspective can change how you view David's sexuality as well.
Yeah. And then we see Geraldine flirting. That is such a cringe from Kate. Have you not used this particular flirting technique?
Which one? The pig noise?
Offering to make coffee but not, and then being really weirdly suggestive about
coffee pop,
opening an unopened jar of coffee.
I mean, that
Love
pop
that
is
pop.
delightful, yeah.
and sitting very close. I did notice, close. Sitting too close has got to be a big no-no for the clergy. Seriously.
Yes.
It's very awkward, but actually quite innocent flirting.
Yeah.
I think the cringe comes from placing ourselves in that situation and knowing how uninterested Tristan actually is. But he kind of goes along with it. Like, he doesn't...
Yeah.
This is one of my big things about Tristan, is it's really obvious that Geraldine finds him attractive because she goes all giggly and schoolgirl stereotype with him, right?
Yeah.
And he doesn't really do anything to discourage. If anything, he eggs her on a little bit, like he's finding it funny.
No, I don't get that at all. Because I feel like he does get it, and he's like, oh, I really shouldn't be here. Because he makes she hasn't even poured him a cup of coffee, and he's already out the door. I think he's like, he's sensing something that's not quite right here. He thinks, actually, you know what? I need to put an end to this. And off he takes a silver briefcase, and he, promises her the gift of seeing her tomorrow. That's interesting. We've read it differently, though.
There's stuff that happens later in the episode that really counteracts that for me, though.
Okay, I can see a bit what you mean. I mean, there's a wave. We need to talk about a wave that happens towards the end of this episode, but let's
there's
save
more
it
than
until we
a
get there.
wave.
Well, yes, but the wave is the worst.
Oh, yeah, that wave is grim. Yes. So we've seen this awkward display of flirting and Geraldine suggesting that they might see something. Oh, well, no, Tristan's suggesting that they might see something of the woman under the cassock, and she says, I assume spiritually. And he's like, yeah. But there's a real contrast there, isn't there, between seeing vicars and religious people as the unobtainable, chaste, there's nothing sexual about them at all, to the complete opposite of, what is under the cassock? And I feel like people can go either one of two ways with that, of either thinking everyone who has got a dog collar is wearing a chastity belt, or they're all this forbidden fruit that needs to be seduced.
Goodness, I've never thought about it, but yeah, maybe. So true.
So we've seen Geraldine flirting, and now we see David flirting with a Ruth.
Oh, yes.
And David doing his James Bond style introduction with the sunglasses. I'm David Horton.
Chairman of the parish council.
Wow.
Yeah.
What I love about this scene is the direct contrast it places with the really awkward but innocent interaction between Geraldine and Tristan. It exposes Geraldine as just being so innocent in her flirting, because for me, David's flirting just feels a bit more creepy.
Yes. He's trying to be suave, isn't he?
Yeah.
It definitely feels like it's kind of manufactured, which is why I love, like, Ruth just humbled him so much. Like, she counteracts, she
Yes.
makes jokes, and actually he's then tripping up over the kind of the flirty techniques he sets up. I think it's really cleverly done, actually.
Yeah.
It is.
And then Ruth wants to go see his buttresses.
Yeah.
So whilst Ruth is looking at David's buttresses, Geraldine is off kissing a mirror, pretending it's Tristan.
Oh yeah. Did you ever do truth or no? Well, not dare. Did you
Yes.
do? Have you ever done this
Yes.
before?
Yeah, absolutely. Were you ever told as a teenager to, like, when you put your thumb and your finger together to, like, make a mouth to practice kissing?
I used to put a face on my finger and my thumb to make me laugh and like to talk to it. I never thought about kissing it. If only I'd done that.
I thought you were going to say to kiss it, and then that would be quite
Like a true face.
You would go for whole character to your hand. Oh, teenagers, we tell each other weird stuff, don't we?
So true.
So Alice comes in to practice her reading, and Geraldine is completely distracted by pouting in the mirror and all the other things that she's doing to try and make herself look gorgeous. And Alice completely calls her out on her crush on Tristan, and she says, "Blimey!"
Blimey, there's juice loose about this hoose. That's a little bit later, isn't it? But I love it.
Is it?
Yeah. She so yeah, I think Alice calls her out and she goes, "No, what?" And she says this phrase, I guess this picks up on a theme from earlier. "It is not the job of a vicar to flirt." And she's like pouting and like doing her hair, sprucing herself.
Yeah, I think Vicars definitely flirt.
Talking about readings, you know what time it is for
Here we go.
game to play.
We might
Where
get a
in the
jingle.
Bible does this Bible reading come from?
Yes. I knew you'd pick up on this.
Of course you did. I cannot resist a little bit of investigation to work out what this is meant to be. So, what are our thoughts? Do you want me to read you what she says?
Yeah, remind us.
I'd like
remind
you
our
to read
listeners.
it like Alice, please.
So the reading is, "Ye are the salt of the earth and sainted. God shall seal your endeavours until ye sit on his right hand. Therefore fight the good fight for his sake, and he shall be your succour."
Sucker.
He shall be your
Succour.
Well, in the church later on, they say it comes from Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 2, which is a book in the Old Testament, sometimes known as Song of Songs. And I did look that up, and it's not that.
No.
And then I was going to look it up further, but then I knew that you, Kate, would have done your proper research into it.
So we know it's not from Song of Solomon, Song of Songs. Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 2 is, "My beloved has gone down to his garden, to the beds of spices, to browse the gardens and gather their lilies." And that's the same chapter that includes things like, "Your hair is like a flock of goats, and your teeth are like a flock of sheep."
Yes.
Which, frankly,
Sheep
would have
teeth.
been comedic gold in its own. But
Yes.
instead...
But not enough...
No. So obviously the joke is being set up for the archaic type face, which does an S that looks a bit like an F. So what we have is a passage which, probably unsurprisingly to you, is not actually in the Bible. What it is, however, is a bit of a Frankenstein mashup and sewn together familiar pieces of scripture, wording to make this sound like it is a proper Bible verse. So we have some references for "You are the salt of the earth," which is from the Gospel of Matthew. I couldn't find "God shall seal your endeavours" anywhere. Is that "God shall see all your endeavours" or "God shall seal your endeavours"? I couldn't quite pick that out.
In my reference book, which is the scripts of the Vicar of Dibley, which we're using to go through this, it says "seal your endeavours."
Until you sit on his right hand. There's lots of allusions to sitting on the right hand of God throughout the Bible. It's a common thing. Therefore fight the good fight is from 1 Timothy 6:12. He shall be your succor. Again, really common biblical phrase. Closest wording I could get was Psalm 59 verse 10.
It is disappointing, though, that it's another Bible verse that's not actually a Bible verse. Well, I'm not sure if it's disappointing. I guess it's kind of creative. But obviously it becomes, like you said, comedic gold.
I'm wondering whether it could be a copyright thing, or it could actually be a sensitivity, a religious sensitivity thing, not wanting to be seen to making fun of a holy text to
Definitely.
many people.
I'm a big fan of that.
Copyright thing. Can it? Can it
Could
be a
be.
copyright thing?
Surely it's out
Bible
of
Well, their translations are copyright.
Oh, of course.
So obviously, this is the second time now we've had a completely fabricated passage from scripture. The last time we had it was David Horton reading out a lesson in the service. Now it's coming from a Bible which David has produced. I can only conclude that this is the word according to David Horton.
I like that. That's an internet fan theory that actually David Horton just edited the Bible for this whole thing. But we go to meet David Horton now, who is in his house with his son, and he does something that I'm kind of impressed with David for doing, that he asks his son Hugo about how he would feel if he went dating and started to ask a lady out. Which I feel is a very un-David thing to do. That I would assume he just would do it as opposed to go, how do you feel about this, Hugo? Whether he'd take Hugo's permission or not, I don't know.
Well, the very David thing is that he is assuming that this is definitely a thing.
Yeah.
That this is set in stone. He's going to start dating Ruth in the imminent future.
And he's checking that he will be discreet, not necessarily that he is happy about it. Because Hugo's first thought is like, oh yeah, can you help me get a girlfriend? I'd really appreciate that.
Yeah. And then I love the stuff that Hugo's doing about, I'm going to go do a party for you, my 30th big brother,
baby.
Bro.
So although I do love this scene, it does make me laugh, I feel like there are a couple of unhelpful digs and like unkind comments for typical body types of older ladies. Did you guys pick up on that? It sort of made me go, ooh, a little bit.
Yeah, a bit of body shaming.
Yeah. Especially in relation to necks. Like, I love our necks. Doesn't Song of Songs say that our necks are like ivory towers?
Yes.
Yeah. Hold fast to the word of God, my sisters.
Well, and actually, again, I think there's this exposure of the double standard here. And for me, as I was watching this with a critical eye, thinking about some of the arguments people have against women in leadership, for me, it's exposing that kind of idea that women shouldn't be in leadership because we're inherently more fickle about relationships. We're going to be more concerned about dating. I mean, I know we had a whole conversation about dating and our anxieties there, but actually it's not only women. It's not a gendered thing. Actually, we have this older man who's also really obsessed at this point about dating and talking about women's appearance. And so I remember one day in college, we'd been in different lectures. I think you'd been in a leadership lecture of some sort, and you came back and you told a story about a guest speaker who'd come in. He made a really inappropriate comment about female clergy and being able to draw in more people to the congregation. Do you remember that?
I remember Jenny's rage, and it still brings me rage, this conversation, but also joy at seeing Jenny just explode with, how dare you say that?
Oh my gosh, I feel sorry for that person that said it, because I can imagine my rage would have been
Don't.
huge. Because I can't remember this instance, but
do you not remember?
No, I'm
we
scared
were-
to go back into the histories in case it ignites my rage once again.
So we were in a lecture on leadership, and we were talking and asking about, obviously we're young women, and
Oh
we
my gosh,
find
it's
it
coming back.
it's hard sometimes for us to be taken seriously because people see us in a kind of granddaughter or daughter thing. So what kind of things could we do to establish our authority? I think I asked a question kind of along those lines. And the first response was, well, I grow a beard, which, you know, if you're able to grow a beard is very helpful. I think we'd be more ridiculed as a bearded lady. Not that beards on ladies are bad, but, you know, people seem to think that they're amusing. And then the other thing that was said was to use your sexiness in ministry. And this is the point that Jenny exploded, and it was a delight to behold.
I just think that's so absolutely unprofessional and ungodly. And I feel like the point of vestments, which I know is a bit of a big word, like the point of wearing like our robes and like our stoles and the clothes we wear to minister in, is to make us almost like, not, I was going to say like blend in. It's not to blend in, because in some ways you stick out, but as in it's to remove everything. It's to remove gender in a way. It conceals body shape. It's to remove the person you are. So actually you're channeling something else. And yet also, obviously, there's the counter argument is like, well, you can't cover that up. Like, you are as you are. But yeah, I can imagine my explodingness as in like, use your sexiness, use your femininity to bring people into church.
And I remember other lectures where I was very cross that we were told not to wear red lipstick because it might distract people in a communion service.
Or being told that our skirts are too short.
Yes! I had that complaint as an email. Me and a colleague sent, someone from church sent an email saying that our skirts were distracting him in worship, and to say they were like knee length or below. It's not like I was wearing hot pants at the front of church. And they sent an email complaining about it.
But then I had the opposite comment once, where someone was upset that I wore trousers all the time and didn't wear skirts as much. Yeah, you just can't win.
That's crazy. So I actually do sympathise with people that's like, actually, there are certain clothes on both men and women that could potentially be distracting. But I think, like you say, if your skirt is like knee length or below, and for someone to comment and say, oh, you're wearing too many the rage is being lit.
Well, and really, it's the double standard, isn't it?
Yeah.
The point is that there's lots of comments made about what female clergy wear, what we look like, how we present ourselves, whether we're too sexual, not sexual enough, whatever. Really, how I interpreted this scene is turning on its head and saying, just because we're young, just because we're female, doesn't make us inherently more sexual or more dangerous or whatever. Actually, all humans are like this, and it's ridiculous to focus on female clergy with it being a problem.
Definitely. And I feel like that fits perfectly with the next scene with Mrs. Cropley and Ruth as they're talking around the flower arranging. I mean, we get some top tips from Letitia here, don't we?
Yeah. Play the field. Snug them all. Yeah. Because, it goes on to Tristan to make a comment about her clothing as well. But I do want to just give a massive shout out for Letitia's fabulous flower arrangements that seem to have herrings posted in them. That just made me laugh and have so much joy. But yeah, Tristan makes a comment about her little black number.
Ooh.
And reading directly from my notes here, the other two can see my visible rage. Obviously, it's not going to come through fully in audio. I have written here, Tristan is a horrible flirt and completely plays Geraldine here because he kisses her on the cheek. This had me shouting profanities at the TV because he knows that she has a crush on her. And you could kind of get away with him pushing the boundaries and teasing and enjoying the flirtation without meaning it to go too far, with the comments about little black dress, whatever. But to then kiss her on the cheek out of nowhere, like, this isn't a greeting. This is just, he suddenly does it.
Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I initially read it as, there may well be something there because, you know, they're both attractive people and, you know, there's that kind of chemistry and friendship building. But I've always, honestly, I've seen that always as like a little bit of a, I don't know, something, I guess an encouragement thing. But then if you think if that happened in real life, it would be horrifying. But it's so weird when you're removed watching it on television, because I've always thought, oh, it's quite innocent. But now that you're bringing it to life for me, I'm like, yeah, that is bang out of order.
Yeah.
Because is there any wonder why she assumes he likes her if he's doing that?
Yeah, for sure. She says potential snogging situation, beginning, and you can obviously you'd be like, yeah, totally. I honestly, I'm not getting these terrible Tristan is an evil poo vibes.
No, he's not. He's not evil.
Yeah,
but he is.
He knows his power.
He knows his power, and he's enjoying his power.
Do you know? I think Tristan thinks Geraldine is a babe, right? This is what I think. This is my nerd fantasy that goes on in my head. I think he thinks, Geraldine, you are good at what you do. You're a powerful woman who I'm attracted to. But at the end of the day, I'm going out with Ruth. I can't go out with you. So I'm gonna maybe have a little flirt. But actually, I think it's kind of innocent.
I mean, of course, there is the alternative possibility, which we haven't considered, is maybe Ruth and Tristan are in an open relationship and they both enjoy flirting with other people.
Very interesting. In this day and age, I'd be like, yes, but...
I wonder if people, when they watched it for the first time in 1994, they wondered if the twist was going to be that actually Tristan was gay. And all that flirting was just kind of camp banter.
Yeah, perhaps.
Maybe.
So shall we move on to the recording of the service? And I wonder if this is actually how Songs of Praise record it. It must be really weird to be recorded having your sermon done like this, where they want different angles. I hope they have more cameras now so that they don't have to stop everything in order for flowers to not be in the way.
Does Songs of Praise actually record the sermon?
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think they... I don't know. We don't know.
Because at least now they have those segments in between songs, don't they?
Yeah. People who are listening who have been avid watchers of Songs of Praise, if you could inform us as to whether they used to have a sermon slot in it or whether this is just a bit of TV magic for this, and we would be very appreciative.
I did notice the Portaloos, which, living in a rural area with 5 rural churches, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
There are not toilets in our churches.
No.
So, very realistic. Good points to that.
Kate, this might be too soon to mention, but I think I've picked up on a super nerdy part of this service that potentially could troll you, which was that Geraldine's sermon, which we kept in Songs of Praise, came before the reading.
I
know!
Yes!
Did you get that?
Well,
you got that.
Well, yes. Yeah, because it's when they watch it back, isn't it? And the reading does come after because the reading's a punchline. It's very odd. It's odd. Like we've already commented that they are not following traditional common worship structure in Dibley. But maybe, maybe they've got permission from the bishop to do so.
Lizzie's like, you've got to justify it some way.
I completely empathise with Geraldine, by the way, when she gets that good laugh for her joke about masterminding the Wombles, and then the second time they've already heard it, and so they don't laugh at it again. And I definitely, when I write my sermons or preaches or talks, whatever it is, in what context, I definitely try and put light-hearted stuff in there. I mean, it depends on the reading and what... It depends on the Bible reading for that day and that kind of thing. But I completely empathise with when you think you've got a really great line that's going to get a bit of a titter, a mini laugh, and it completely falls flat. That hurts.
Yeah.
Yes. And talking of Geraldine's sermon, I love this sermon.
Yes.
I really love what she's doing, because actually it's tying up and reflecting everything that we've been exploring through the episode so far, because she says when she was first exploring getting ordained, she got all these questions and she names those anxieties of people saying, oh, there'll be pantyhose on the church radiators, hymns will become hers, and that worrying about all these little things overshadows the big issues.
Yeah.
And then talks about, really, it's about how much you help those who need help and how much you love people and show your love to them. Because ultimately, Geraldine's crushes don't stop her doing her job. They don't make her less effective as a priest. At the core of her being, she is a cracking priest because she loves and she helps. Just like having kids or getting divorced or liking fashion or playing board games, liking D&D, doesn't stop the core of our job, of who we are as priests, which is about helping those who need help and loving people and showing that we love them.
Amen.
Nice.
Amen, sister. Ah, Kate, you're dropping all the wisdom bombs today. I love it.
Ow!
So then we have the green room after party after they finish recording, and Geraldine gets Tristan's number. Well, Tristan offers Geraldine his number, and David goes and asks Ruth for her number, all under false pretenses. And then we head over to the vicarage and we hear Geraldine on the phone with Tristan. Or is she?
You've forgotten to pick up the phone.
I know!
What I love about the scene is there's this brilliant moment where Geraldine lies about her crush to Alice, but then she glances at the picture of Jesus and then tells the truth.
Oh.
And I love that because it's just this perfect bit of timing which you only notice on multiple watches.
Yeah, that's great. And she just spills out her heart of all the reasons why it should be right and therefore it should work, which I think I've definitely experienced in not even relationships, but suggestive relationships. Of course, you two would work. You both like going to church, and that's the only thing that you have in common. And so, of course, you should be a match made in heaven, and that's just not the case at all.
But this is a beautiful moment, isn't it, between Geraldine and Alice? Because, like, can you imagine talking to your verger or your church warden or someone on your ministry team about this massive crush you're having? It's like, oh, in reality, I'm not really sure. But then here, she, like you said, she spills out her heart, and Alice almost like cheers her on, and you see this actually like super, super delicious like girl friendship blossoming. Yeah. And it's like, okay, we know Alice is a cheerleader for life now.
Yeah. Cheerleader for life. I love that. That is what Alice is.
Yeah. So it's really built up. We get this fantastic moment of, is there actually something here? Has God been moving things? Are things coming together? The phone rings and it's David Horton revealing that the number Ruth gave him is the same number as Tristan's number. So Geraldine puts 2 and 2 together, realises that at the very least Ruth and Tristan live together. She's realised she's built it up in her head, and then she says this, I'm going to quote this because it just really hit home for me. It's one of the disadvantages of priesthood. For blokes looking for a hot chick, the vicarage is hardly the first port of call. Local disco, take a condom. Local vicarage, take a raspberry sponge. Oh well, let's do the tea rotors.
I mean, I quite like a raspberry sponge. That'd be lovely.
So do I, to be honest.
Yeah.
Someone brings me a raspberry sponge.
Yeah.
I've got my heart, to be honest.
I've had a little thought here. What if the number that they gave was their work number, and actually it's an office number, and Ruth and Tristan were never actually a thing?
Plot twist.
Plot twist. And then we finish with the original watch party before we had them online. Is they all gather together in the church hall, sort of various bits of gym equipment, to sit down and watch songs of praise and watch themselves on the telly.
Thing I particularly loved about this broadcast is obviously we get the reveal that Cecil has picked a Wet, Wet, Wet song as the anthem. And this is a game we can all play, is how easy it is to change pop songs into worship songs.
Yes.
And actually, there's a reverse game where you look at hymns and you look at worship songs and how easy it is to make them awkwardly romantic and sexual just by changing a couple of words.
I've never played this game. I think it might ruin many songs or hymns.
Yes, you have.
There's a lot of common language.
Oh my gosh.
That is a game that we do play in the car sometimes. If we've got a playlist on shuffle, that you hear a song and what's the sermon that you deliver from it.
Kate, you are so good at that game. I remember in college we would play this game and I had nothing and you had like 3 or 4 sermons for every song that was played. I feel like, yeah.
I used to play this at university when I used to be a chaplaincy assistant, and myself and the other chaplaincy assistants would put a playlist on shuffle of our shared music, and whatever song came up, we were in the pub, we'd have to try and come up with a quick sermon. It's a fun game to play.
So we hear Alice's incredible reading and the joke that has started from the very beginning of the episode and gone on through the graveyard with the S's that look like F's. And the King James version, we hear Alice give her reading that has lots of S's but are said as F's. And it's just brilliant. It's so clever and brilliant.
Yeah,
as we said, this has been set up right from the start of the episode, and here we get the payoff.
What I love about this is like the determination, but the terror that you can hear in Geraldine's voice as she screams "sucker." She's like, "Sucker!" It's like, oh my gosh, Alice, don't do it, don't do it. She sees it coming, and I just love that.
And also, Alice knows that this is wrong, but I think because she's done it once, she has to continue.
Yeah.
We've all been there. It's horrible. I mean, you get a wave. I mean, I know I do. A little wave of anxiety whenever someone says, "Oh, so who would like to read the Bible passage for today?" And if you haven't had a chance to scan it for big long names or place names, then it's always scary, isn't it? But this adds on an extra layer of terror, really.
So that brings us to the end of the episode. We've gone through some highs and lows. Obviously, one of the big themes has been dating and the sexualisation of female clergy, or also not. We've talked about how actually the most important thing is loving and caring, and how all of this relationship stuff is important to Geraldine as a character, as a human, but actually is quite separate from who she is as in her priestly ministry and whether or not she's a good priest.
Yeah, that's so true. And we've seen again the continuing blossom of Geraldine and Alice's relationship. And we get just a final glimpse of that with a joke at the very, very end of the episode, which I love because Alice thinks she calls herself stupid. Like, she sets herself up and she goes, oh, stupid. And Geraldine looks at her so sincerely and she's like, no. And then Alice does get it. And it's so, I just love the way that they sort of play off each other, but Geraldine's sincerity when she's like, no, you're not stupid. And there's that real love and understanding.
Last thing I want to say on this is Geraldine says about not finding hot chicks in a vicarage. And I think here represents 3 vicarages that have hot chicks living in them.
Aww.
That was almost like a scared chick noise, but yeah, she's here.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Vicars Watch Dibley. Thank you to Toby for editing our ramblings.
Any views expressed in this podcast are our own and don't necessarily represent those of the Church of England or any other organisations with which we are affiliated.
And as always, bless you for listening.
What does Mortal Kombat and a church in Helsinki have in common?
I don't know. What does Mortal Kombat and a church in Helsinki have in common?
Finish him!
What? Oh my goodness!
Oh,
Oh, that's brilliant! Finish him. Oh.